Welcome to day 4 of our daily show from Edgbaston. India started the day 257 runs ahead of England with 7 wickets in hand. England finished it needing just another 118 runs with 7 wickets in hand to make it 4 wins from 4 under Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes. A remarkable turnaround, Ben. There was even a little collapse of 2 for 3 snuck in there. Ben, let's start with Root and Bairstow at the end, with the exception of that Pujara drop catch when Bairstow was on 14. They're pretty much chanceless and went through the gears really, really well.
Yeah, and it wasn't just going through the gears, it was kind of going up and down them, I guess. Like, it wasn't as if they started out, blocked out for a bit and then started to attack. There were periods where they were kept quiet a bit and periods where they then came out a bit more. Bairstow wasn't tempted, say, by Jadeja sort of bowling it into the rough outside the leg stump. He was very happy to just kick that away. But then when the short balls came, and that clearly was a tempting thing that India were trying to get him to attack, he backed himself to be like, okay, I am good enough to just hit this over the guys that are stationed there. And he was, as he has been all summer. I mean, they're so good, those two. And it's like, because it's kind of snuck up on us how good Bairstow's become, it's easy to forget, like, it's not easy to forget, but, you know, there was so much promise for so long that looked like it would be unfulfilled. And now it is just being fulfilled, like, completely. And England now have the 2 brightest batting talents of their generation in England, 2 of the brightest batting talents of their generation in the world, to be honest, both at their best at the same time in Test cricket. And for everything else that can go wrong or right in a Test side, if you have those 2 things, you'll be pretty formidable. And it doesn't show any sign of stopping. You know, at this point last summer, we would probably have been saying about Root, like, he can't possibly keep this going on. You know, this must eventually end. And like, it seemed like it would have done over the Ashes, and it just hasn't. He's kind of maintained that same level. And Bairstow is, if anything, like this. I mean, this 5-inning stretch is probably greater than anything that Root did last year. Maybe look at the 3 massive hundreds at the start of the year in Asia. So yeah, they're both absolutely extraordinary, and I guess long may it continue.
And I think the most impressive thing was, if you're comparing this Test match and this England team to last summer, that little period where India took 3 wickets for 2 runs either side of tee was exactly how the 2 India wins happened in London last summer. Periods where England really struggled to score runs and India kind of would seize the moment and kind of really try to suck all the life out of the England run chases. And weirdly, I want to focus on Kohli. For a guy who isn't captain, for a guy who doesn't bowl, I think he was almost as important as Bumrah in that little passage, really geeing up the team, really geeing up the crowd. And this series so far is defined by those 2 performances at Lords and the Oval, and this was very, very similar. His famous comment at Lords was, "Let's give these guys 60 overs of hell." That was a very easy thing to do, to give hell to that team compared to this one. But as soon as he sniffed that chance, he was right on it, getting in the batter's ear, getting the crowd going. And I know he really grates England players and supporters, but it must do something for the team. And given all that, I thought it was so impressive how Root and Bairstow then sucked the life out of the India momentum, because the atmosphere here was crazy, both in favour of England before the 3-wicket burst, and then afterwards when India took the 3 wickets, it was in favour of India. And weirdly, I think the moment that then changed the day again was the botched reviews of Root and Bairstow. I thought that gave England fans some energy after Root and Bairstow had actually started reasonably cautious. There was that Pujara chance, but after that, and then there's a big drop-off from Bumrah and Shami to the rest of the India attack. From that moment on, England were in kind of cruise control for the rest of the day. Yeah,
and there was actually like another possible review just after that India didn't go for it, and they were right not to go for it. But you could almost sense that kind of the doubts creeping in a bit, that like they were starting to second guess, like, oh, actually, we think this is out, but we can't risk our last review because what if something absolutely obvious happens later? And you're absolutely right about Colin. Like, you know, everyone could sort of sense that this was happening. Like, Sky immediately put out the video of him celebrating that thing. You know, he's running across the pitch, he's getting a talking to from the umpires. It did feel very, very similar. And, you know, and you go back to those games as well. Was it at Lords or at the Oval when England had a century stand for the first?
Yeah, at the Oval. It was remarkably similar. At the Oval, India were defending 3-6-8, and England got a 100-run stand, and the game was basically done within an hour. That. So it could have been very, very similar here. And to be honest, I thought India, with the way Bumrah was bowling, I thought surely it's inevitable. Especially, bear in mind, this could still be crucial tomorrow. England have an extremely long tail. With Broad in at 8, Potts at 9, Leach and Anderson at 10 and 11. That is a tail that can be blown over and still might.
even Billings at 7, who's a downgrade on folks, I suppose. And, you know, even though he's a very talented cricketer who's got experience in white ball cricket, international cricket, he's had high pressure moments. This will be something else, you know, with a test series on the line in his second and a half test match. That will be like, yeah, there is still an opportunity. But again, I think one of the weird things about this summer is how the score has never felt like what the score actually is. Like even at the end of day 2, when England were 98-5 and India had made more than 400, you had to kind of remind yourself that like England have been quite bad so far. Like it didn't feel like they had like that was the scoreline, and it did feel like they could get back into it, which they have now done. And that's the opposite to last summer, when even when they made that century stand, and you know really you're then chasing 250 odd with 10 wickets in hand, which should be quite doable. You kind of think like England aren't really in this. This is sort of fun, but it's like, you feel that like it's still India's to lose. Whereas here, like you felt like England had a chance, even when India were like 7 down at innings, kind of thing. Actually, India might only set England about around 350 here, and then actually the pitch isn't doing too much. The ball is not doing as much as it has done in previous summers. There are weak links in the attack, and we know what this England team can do. So it hasn't felt as absurd as it should because of everything that's gone on this summer, I suppose.
Before we get on to India and how they bowled in particular, just a word on Alex Lees. You wrote a really good piece basically describing that maybe this wasn't actually the case, but on paper he would have averaged in the low 20s had he made a failure in the second innings. Yet he came out batting like a way that we probably didn't think was possible when he was blocking it in the Caribbean, coming down the wicket to Mohammad Shami, reverse, hit slog sweeping Jadeja. In between balls, he was shadow batting leg side hoiks and reverse sweeps. It was amazing for a guy whose international career was potentially on the line.
Yeah, it's incredible because we were both in Barbados when he played, in a way, his most substantial innings of that trip. He got 30 of 138 on the first morning. It was a flat pitch, really slow pitch, and you're sort of wondering that. And like there were quite a lot of shots where he was kind of trying to attack, and the timing just wasn't there. Like it was sort of creeping towards the rope off and not getting there. And then you're sort of England end up making 500, just sort of discussing, is that good enough? Is that the sort of thing you can do? But sort of thinking like, okay, the player he is a guy who can see off the new ball, score pretty slowly, sort of scratch around, and that could be valuable. But he might not be able to be anything more. Like I don't think there was much people even suggesting then that Lees could have these other gears. And then all of a sudden he comes out and plays like that today. I mean, third ball, he came down and sort of smeared Mohammad Shami through the leg side. And this is Mohammad Shami who bowled so brilliantly in the first innings. I mean, he never gets the rewards he deserves for how well he bowls, but he beats the bat so often. And to do that when, like, his career kind of, or it's not his career, but his place should have been on the line, really. Like, he hasn't had, that full backing. People haven't discussed him as much as Crawley. He hasn't had that full backing that Crawley has had. And if he had struggled, there's also a long time until the next series for a few rounds of the county championship for him to, possibly go and stake another claim, or possibly someone else to come and say who claim. Like, this was a big innings for him, and he played just like a dream, basically. And that is a lot of credit to McCullum as well, I guess, who it's a really difficult message to not just to come up with, but to sell as well, because as much as Lees was he scored freely and was free flowing, there was also a calculated nature to it. He spoke after play about the how all the left hands on the side have talked about, if the left arm spinner comes on, it's your job to take him down. You'll almost be criticised for not playing the attacking shot there. But equally, it's knowing when it's your time to go. It's backing yourself to do that, and it's knowing that if you think it's your time to go, but you get it wrong, you'll have the backing of the coach. All that's a very difficult thing to convey, and McCullum's managed to do that and get a player like Lees, who, before now, you hadn't seen that from him, or before McCullum took over. There was a hint in that second test against New Zealand, but before then, you wouldn't have said that was the kind of player he could be, really.
And then on India, as good as England were, India, Bumrah and Shami aside, were not. Siraj, Thakur and Jadeja are expensive. And this isn't actually that new for India. Since England and India last played each other, South Africa won at Canada twice in fourth innings run chases in their series win over India earlier this year, which was a bit of a surprise. But that kind of performance from India isn't brand new. And it wasn't just the bowling. I thought, well, first of all, the selection of Ashwin looked stranger and stranger. I know we banged on about this all last summer, but it's looking stranger and stranger. Who would England least like to face on this day? I mean, Bumrah 1, Ashwin 2, then Shami. Shardul Thakur is someone who you can look to attack, and this England team are going to try and attack bowlers. Siraj went at 6 and over against South Africa in the 4th innings in, I think, the second test there. He was very expensive today. And in the field, I thought India were really sluggish. The drop catcher, Pujara's drop catcher Bairstow could prove pivotal. But also a couple of times where Kohli was like rightfully having a go at players who were just like ushering the ball to the fence and not diving. Maybe just tired legs, having not played a test match in a while. But India were reasonably poor. And I don't want to criticise Bumrah that much because I don't think people really know how to operate against England when they really go through the gears. But I just thought on an individual level, some of their bowlers and some of the fielding was not what we'd expect from this India team.
Yeah, and on the Ashford thing as well, I'd say that's a slight misreading what the conditions have been like in England so far. You saw that New Zealand really struggled for not having a high quality spinner, and that the ball hasn't been the seeming menace as it has been in previous years. So you are going to, like, innings are just longer, like more runs are being scored. You do want a guy who can sort of bowl those long spells as well as sort of threatening when he does them, which is what Ashwin can do so well. Yeah, it's Kevin Peterson on Sky was quite critical of India's tactics, but it must be such a hard thing to do when you do have, especially when it's Root and Bairstow, and you can have the best plans in the world, you can bowl brilliantly to them, but they could just survive it. To have two guys who are batting that well and attacking, to be like, no, we're going to keep the fielders in, we're going to let you score like runs, that must be a really, really tough decision to come to. And actually, we don't yet know in a way which is the right way to go, because there'll be a second new ball to come tomorrow, and it won't be quite a definite thing by the time it comes, you think, unless it can go absolutely crazy tomorrow morning. So then you'll have what you think it will be.
Well, England only need like 5s to win the game before the second new ball, and obviously the first half hour is going to be huge. But if Root and Bairstow get through that, they will be making a concerted effort to finish the game by the second new ball, just as they did at Lords against New Zealand.
Yeah, that is true. But I guess as a captain, 40 or 50 overs out, you don't know that quite so much. If you're there thinking like, well, the second new ball could be a factor, we actually do need to keep these runs down, because if we get 1 or 2 of these before then we have, that's when a few runs becomes crucial, rather than like that. It is a really tough thing to do. So to say it's not right to be critical. I almost think they'll be more frustrated with the bat than with the ball, I think. And this is maybe another area actually where England sort of, the fact that they will try and chase anything means that it can become a bit muddled in the third innings, basically. Like because you don't know how many you'll need, you end up making fewer than you should in a way. You're sort of like, oh, we should have enough. Actually, we don't really have enough. And it all becomes a bit more, there's just another thing to think about, I guess. And
yeah, I thought it was very, very similar to the Trent Bridge Test match where New Zealand didn't really know how to bat in the third innings either. I thought with the amount of time left in this game, I thought India were just a little bit irresponsible. Like the way Shreyas Iyer got out was just a bit tame for that period in the game. And, England have now done this 3 times in a row. I know what India have set is more than anything that New Zealand set England, but 3 times in a row, England have just gone for a reasonably hefty chase. India should have known that they to be safe in this game, they needed to set something well in excess of 450, which looked, to be honest, at the start of the day, something that they were going to achieve, to be honest.
Yeah, and especially when, like, the flip side of knowing that England are going to go for it is that you shouldn't need to worry too much about, dangling the carrot or leaving enough overs left. You can set them, England would have tried to chase 450 in a day, like you can basically set them what you like, and they're going to basically come at you. So you don't need to leave overs left from that point of view. So yeah.
Well, as we both said a couple of times, the game is very much not over. England, we know they've got a collapse in them. They've already shown that in this innings already. Cheers, Ben. We'll be back tomorrow after the end of day 5. Cheers for listening.